And good evening to you, and thank you for joining me again for another edition of Inside the Process. And here's where I combine music, playing, with some explanations or some look behind the scenes into the musical process, or maybe over some of my experiences, or maybe even some insights that perhaps I could find that might be interesting or even helpful for musicians or non-musicians. So thanks for being here. Thank you for all of you who support me via the links that you'll find on the support tab of my website, and there's a link to that. And while you're at the website, if you check that out, look around and see what you find. Some cool things are happening. It's an extremely busy time. Yeah, let's get going. And what I'm going to do to just kind of set things up is play a tune up front. Going to get me in the zone here. I got it bad and that ain't good. I don't know if it's good or bad or even what I got. Well, maybe I do, but that's beside the point. So, what I want to do at first is I want to play a little melody. And I'm going to throw this out as an example, and it's going to be a bit of a quiz. What melody am I playing? Right? And I won't be able to see your response because I can't hook up the internet twice at once, and my data really doesn't suffice. So I'll see your response later, or you can text me if you have my number. But here's the melody. I got to think about this. I got to play this just right. There, that was just right, maybe. So, did you recognize it? It's a really familiar tune. Let me play it again. Now, let's think about it for a second. And of course, maybe there are 4 correct answers in the comments already that I don't see. But let me even out the notes in the rhythm. And the reason that I wanted to play it just right is actually I wanted to play it just wrong. Let me even out the notes in the rhythm. Now, you've heard me say, I'm not telling you the name of that song because if you don't know it, I can't help you at this point. But what I would always say is that time is the delivery system. Rhythm, if you want to say rhythm, is the delivery system for all music. And it is what organizes the music, the notes, so that they make sense. And I would always say the next line, but I never challenged myself to do it, which would be, you can take the most familiar tune anywhere and play it rhythmically wrong enough that you will no longer recognize it even though all the notes are correct. So I was actually driving to a gig or someplace, a rehearsal, I don't know, I was driving, which of course I spend more time in my home than I used to, so any kind of driving is almost novel, but as I'm going down the road, I'm kind of plotting in my head, how can I take Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and rhythmically foul it up? Oh, because what I would say is that I can't take a tune like that on purpose, any tune, and play it so wrong you can't recognize it. So I made it a challenge to myself to, and I kind of mapped it out and put the accents in the wrong place and grouped them differently. I almost changed all harmony too, but I thought that would be unfair. So the point at first is that it is time, it is how the music feels. Organized, yes, but even beyond that, how the music feels that allows it to communicate. Play all the right notes in the world. If you can't be in a definable time, it's not going to make sense, or it's not going to say what you want it to say at the very least. So it's better to play solid time and wrong notes, maybe some, not everyone, than 100% correct notes and time that doesn't make sense. And let me take it now further, that you want to have the correct rhythm. Well, I actually kind of said this. You want to have the correct rhythm, but in order to feel connected, you want to take it further and you want to have a good sense of time. And those are 2 different things. So what I like to do with beginner students, and it's been a while since I've done a lot of beginner teaching. I've done some in the last maybe 10, 15 years. But back when I was younger, and if you've watched these Wednesday nights, you know I chronicled that when I was 17 and got a driver's license, I quickly picked up a big roster of piano students that I could go to homes and teach because I could drive there, you know. And of course you get a lot of beginners. I didn't realize this at first, but now I do with every student, especially a new one. It is really important to instill a sense of the feeling of time from the very beginning, because that's the thing about the beginner stages of piano that is the most rough. And for lots of people who've been playing piano or music all their lives, rhythm is still a problem. I mean, rhythm typically has to come with some work. And rhythm is not the result of getting all the component parts right, although that's how it's taught. You know, I've used that illustration about the jigsaw puzzle, right? And it applies here too. You know, with each little thing you learn, this is a quarter note, and this is one count, and you put your finger here, and this is the middle C. All those little pieces, you put them together, and then you get something that works, but it works mechanically, but you want to take it to that next place. So what I tell the beginner student is you always have to define where the one is. So to me, that pulse is actually more important than anything that happens in between those pulses. Of course, you want to be correct. And so what happens in beginner lessons is you'll learn, you know, let's say you learn Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And it may actually take 2 or 3 lessons because you got to learn an extra hand position or move something. But you learn a quarter note gets 1 beat, okay? So you'll see in every beginner book, play or count evenly or have your beats even. You know, I look at that and I sort of blink. It's like, it's not just about having them even, it's about the pegs going in the slots, which is a different thing. But then it says, and accent the first beat of the measure. So you can take those mechanical approaches, get your beats even, and then you can make that first count louder, 1, 2, 3, 4. And maybe that's what it takes in the very beginning in order to define where one is. But if you just focus on feeling the one, eventually that little accent or that push in deeper comes from a place that you're feeling that pulse. You're just not mechanically making the key go down faster because you know that's one. And we define the one, and whatever it is, however simple thing, and we're going to not really relax, well, not relax is the wrong word, but we're going to stay at it until that one is defined, however it's defined. Because this is like the most important thing about playing music. I don't know that this is typically taught at the very beginning, but it really should be. And so the little trick I'll play, especially if I'm in somebody's house, this is what I would do, is I would wait until somebody was passing through, a parent or you know, a sibling or something, and I might ask them to listen. All right, so we set this up, and the student plays. All right, and it's all organized, and the one is defined. You can feel that, right? Now, I can't see you through the phone, in part because I'm looking through the back, but this is not a two-way Zoom call. But it's not out of the question that even when I did that, or at least somewhere along the way up till now, you have tapped your foot. And it actually is without fail. It's never not worked that when a student does that in their house, with somebody who's connected to them listening, they're really listening because they're connected to that person, and the foot starts to tap. Because when you define the time, you're communicating that organization that those notes go in, and that person is getting it. So as soon as I see that, it's like, hey, look, you're making them tap their foot. How did you do that? Wait, did we tell them to tap their foot? Did you say something? I think you cheated. Now, and we go through this whole thing about, wow, look at what control you have over that person by having them tap their foot just because of how you felt the music. Right? That's, to me, a really important concept to get right off the bat, because it's not simply about being correct. In fact, being correct as the goal doesn't necessarily take you to the best place in terms of communicating, and music is about communicating. And I go back to something that Lang Lang says to students. You've heard me say this. Don't just play the note, feel the note, and make every new piece your best friend. Right? So you're communicating with it. So when you learn your piano and you go through your books and you learn more complex pieces and you go, it's kind of like if you're not deliberately developing your sense of time along the way, you're basically learning to put bigger jigsaw puzzles together. The first one's with 10 pieces, and then you practice, take lessons for a year, you're putting a 100-piece puzzle together. Then at some point you're putting a 500-piece puzzle together. And because you're learning all of these things and you're piecing it together. But when you have a jigsaw puzzle and you put it together and you can see the picture, right? But what does the picture have on it? It has lines all over it, right? And the real picture has no lines, and that's what we're going for. So I don't know if that makes sense or not, but we're gonna go on. So let's talk about feeling the one, and I'm going to play another simple tune. Okay. Now, simple melody. I'm not playing anything but the melody. And if you played any music, you're going to recognize or visualize that can be written in quarter notes or eighth notes. But let's write it in quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So we're going to find that one. And let's make an eighth note. So we define this as the one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And whatever I play, now even now if I stop playing a note on one, it won't even matter. So now, most of the ones in there, I didn't even play a note, but you were tapping your foot. So I'm connecting with you with that sense of time. So all of this to say, feeling is not counting or even thinking. All right? Feeling is the relationship you develop with time. So, you know. You could look at what I just did and say, oh my goodness, you played Yankee Doodle, right? And now you changed up all the notes. Now you had to learn that, and you had to put that. No, I did not put a jigsaw puzzle together. What I did was I put it in a template, a rhythmic template, a feeling, and it was that brought me to, because obviously I'm not thinking about all that. So it's not the notes that defined it, it's the time, it's the feeling. Now, some people are going to be more predisposed to that than others, right? Some people could, use help. Me, I always need to kind of reinforce the mechanical thing. In fact, I had a rehearsal this afternoon, and it was Paul Mederi, and Paul Mederi and I were going through a tune, and he had charted it out. We were taking something where we actually played a tune in a different meter signature, and it's like, well, wait a minute, no, you can't notate this. This is 4/3, and this is, it's my thing is like, you got to feel it. But for me, it was a good exercise for me to actually think about and try to write out what rhythm if I'm playing it. It gave me a headache doing it, But I need to work on that. And other musicians who are very mechanically minded or very organized and structured and can read that sheet music really well probably need to spend some time doing some exercises and doing some things to really enforce the feeling. And of course, one of the best ways to do it is play with other musicians. Now, this is a detour. I didn't write this down. But pianists have that disadvantage that they make music all by themselves. And if you play any other instrument, if you come up and, you learn a saxophone or something, you're not going to sit and play it by yourself all the time. You play it with the radio or backing tracks at least. But you'll find a band to play with. You'll find people to play with. That's why there are community bands. That's why there are bands in school. And that's a great way to do it. So with that in mind, I'm going to hip you a little bit. I'm going to show you an approach I use to help me open the space, which is something I do every morning. And I'll talk more about specific practicing things and things I do. But right now, and I'm not going to demonstrate it because I'm really not in that space to do it. But first thing in the morning, ideally before I engage with anything, I'm playing freely. However it goes, and I let it happen, and then eventually it falls into something, and now my expression is starting to find its groove, so to speak, right? And as soon as I can get there and start feeling that, I put the metronome on, and I'm going to put it at 20 because I've got this reliably now that I can get here at 20. I'm working at doing it at 10, which is a little more difficult. And I guess let me back up and say, when you're feeling something, you're not thinking it. And I'm using the word feeling, and it's kind of maybe a little bit too generic of a word, but just get the dichotomy that your thoughts, in that part of your brain waves are higher and all that, and that feeling part, that gut part, that intuition part, that heart as opposed to head, whatever you want to call it, that doesn't operate with those kind of thoughts. So I have this metronome on, and I am absolutely not counting with it. Oh, the wrong thing to do. Now, you want to use a metronome to help figure things out, sure. But the main purpose of the metronome for me is to give me this place to touch, all right? And if I think about it, I'm done. So I just have to let it seep into my awareness. And I'm not going to try to demonstrate it because, like I say, I'm not in the space. But I'll start playing freely like I did, and it'll settle into some sort of groove. And eventually, without planning it, without counting it or mapping it out, I'm going to find that the metronome is matching beats that I'm playing. And what I'm trying to develop is to stay in that space. And if you're really in that space, then you can engage like something else with your mind. You can't mess with that space, but if I'm really there, then I can pay enough attention to know where that thing is ticking. And you know what's crazy? What happens? I'm usually playing something in 4, but the metronome's not even beating on 1. Now this hopefully doesn't sound like I'm contradicting what I'm saying, what I said before about define the 1. When you want to communicate a melody, you have to deliver it in time, okay? But this is connecting with, and I'm realizing, there's 1, and I'm sort of listening to it, and I'm trying to figure out, and I realize that I'm dividing this into either 5, 7, or 9 typically. Occasionally 4, but I'm playing measures of 4, and I'm dividing it in 7 ways by not doing anything but just working on opening that feeling space. So it's in essence the combination now of that feeling space that you open up as a musician, and the concrete skills that you have and the things that you work on cognitively and understand. And it's of course marrying them and getting to the point where, the feeling takes over everything else and you're not thinking about it. That's the goal. And especially for me, that's the goal of classical music. Yeah, and which is why classical music needs to be memorized, and I can't. I can't memorize it because I'm going to wind up conceptually changing it. So I can never really pull it off because you have to, in order to get your brain waves down, you can't be engaging something visually. Now, I come to understand that just recently, but that explains why ultimately you have to memorize everything as a classical musician. Yeah, sorry, I got distracted by something out my window. So, for me then, if I want to remember something, and I'm sure hoping this is making sense, I have no idea. If I want to remember something, I can't remember what it is, and I can't think about it, but I can remember what it feels like. Right? And this is how the title came to be, Feeling Time. So what notes did I write down? When I want to recall something, I find the feeling. So I'll give myself a reference, like, let's say I'm playing a tune with somebody. I have, let's say a singer-songwriter, 2 singer-songwriters I work with regularly, and I have to find that space again. And it's like, okay, well, it's like what the girl from Ipanema Bossa Nova feel. But maybe I'm not playing Girl from Ipanema, maybe I'm playing some other tune. But Girl from Ipanema is my reference. Get there. So let me play a tune, All the Things You Are, and let me play it first. Let me just state it, and then we'll apply those different feelings to it. And these aren't now jigsaw puzzles that we're putting together because everyone's going to be different. This is how I've said before, that you have the completed picture and you slice it apart, right? And then you take every piece, but it's already connected to the context because that's how you've experienced it. All right? All right, so let's take this tune. There's the song, All the Things You Are. But you're going to say, wait a minute, Joe. You did not define the 1. You played it out of time. Aha. Actually, I did define the 1. Because what I did is I played rubato, but The rubato is not the random thing where it's like I'm going to play this longer, I'm going to play this shorter. I still have the reference of the straight time expanding and contracting. You're always feeling. So here it is in straight time. 1, 2, 3, So even when we're playing rubato and I'm playing out of time, I'm referencing that one. So let's say I want to now do the reference thing, and I want to swing all the things you are. So I'm not, again, putting the jigsaw puzzle together. I'm not like taking the sheet music and learning this and lining this up with this. I'm feeling this. I could have played better notes there. I hope you tapped your foot to that. Right? Now let's do it now with the Ipanema-ish bossa nova feel. Wanted to keep going, but maybe I should have. But let's go to one more example. And this years ago, a musician friend, and I never thought of this, said, "Yeah, it's to play all the things you are in 3/4 as a waltz." Now, of course, in that case, you actually rearranging the rhythm of the melody to fit the 4 beats into 3, right? And again, it's a feel thing. You learn to feel 3, and then you can place it in. Alright, so I made up for not extending the masa by extending the 3. All the same tune, all different spaces, all coming from a sense of feeling. So let's revisit for a minute the idea of the references, the stylistic references. And here's maybe a silly example. I just was thinking of this earlier today. So what if we just take... Right? Now, let's say beginner students learning Old MacDonald. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4. But one thing that I'll do, and really a big handicap of giving lessons on Zoom, is you can't play together in real time. Because I could play something like that underneath, right? Well, alright, and now that's helping the student feel the 1, right? And sort of syncing with me. That's a starting point. If you're doing it by yourself, you know, the reference could be like Watermelon Man. Circumstance, I'm going to find a way to be silly. So, alright, but the idea of quoting, right, can happen when there's a solid time base to put that feeling into. Alright, so let me give you another example. So when I do the Escape from Home piano hour, it's really a good discipline for me, and I would use the Mainstay Monday shows in a similar way. I would take the opportunity to use them to make myself do things that I wouldn't just do for no reason, because you just couldn't motivate yourself, you know, to do all these things. And so those of you who know me know that I live in the older tunes, you know. I know so many more tunes from the 1940s and before than I do for the 1950s and beyond. And some of the tunes that you hear me play in the Escape from Home hour that are like 60s and 70s, there's some that I've done for years, you know, like this one. Yeah, but there are others that, you know, I look at and I said, that would work, but how would it work? And I'm willing to let a tune sit for months. Months and months and months, until it falls in me how I'm going to feel it. I did that one a couple of weeks ago, and it was like, oh man, I got it in that place where I can really feel it, or, you know, where I can feel it. Which is not about me like playing it like the record or anything like that. And so, I'll tell you what happened with one tune that I played not too many weeks ago on the stream. I'm doing my thing in the morning, and I'm just playing freely. This is before I put the metronome on. And the idea is to get into that non-thinking space. And then trust, just trust, no matter what you're hearing yourself play, trust that it's organizing itself. You're connecting, you know, to the bigger thing, right? And I know when, like, I'm ready to move on, when it coalesces into a tune. And sometimes, you know, it'll coalesce into just a familiar tune, or all of a sudden I'll be playing The Entertainer or something. And it's like, okay, you know, I got stuff through the cattle chute, I can go on to the next thing. But sometimes, you know, I'm starting to see this happen and recognize that it's happening, which is good, is that I'll start playing something that I've never played before, but I have enough of awareness of to play, or in a way that I wouldn't have thought of. And I'm like, oh, well, I should try this and I should try this. So this is not the reference thing now. This is just letting it happen organically. So there's this tune, the Stevie Wonder tune, Overjoyed. I've been staring at this tune for a long time, you know. And I think I played it once months ago. But it was just like, you know. And then what happened one morning, I caught myself doing this, and I'm watching myself like, whoa, okay. I'm playing it in 3/4. I'm playing it as a waltz, as a floaty waltz. And it's like, that's how I can, you know, I'm just going to own this tune. I don't know that I own the tune yet. Or if I ever really will. But this is how I can like get inside this tune. And this is on the list for me to record for tunes from home. Even though I haven't been doing as many of those lately, you know, just random posts of tunes. But when I looked at the comments after the stream of me playing it, you know, and the reference, oh, nice to hear a Stevie Wonder tune. Okay? And that person, and presumably nobody, cared that I played it in 3/4. I played it in a way that I could deliver it and communicate it, and of course I organized the time to play it in 3/4. Now, having said all that, if I try to actually play it as a tune, and I'm going to try, it may or may not work as well, because I still need to play with it some more, but of course there are so many things I'm trying to do at once right now that it's... But anyway, let's see what happens. So I want to take that tune a little further, but the tune's definitely going the right way. I finally found how I can best feel it. So, you know, I mentioned about where I've come from, you know, stylistically, where, you know, those of you who know me know this, when I was a teenager, and especially the big driver here was when I met the Mediri brothers when I was 14, right? And I had already kind of discovered like vintage trad jazz. I still didn't really know much about it, but I found it on the radio and started to buy some records. But they came into music just completely zoned on that Benny Goodman trio era stuff, like late 30s Teddy Wilson. And so from that point on, for years, that's all I listened to. Yeah, I was amused myself by finding in a box somewhere my collection of 45s. Yeah, and I have 45s that stopped in 1974. You know, whether they was Paul Simon or whatever. And then after that, I lived someplace for a long time. Now I was drawn to it, really drawn to it. Maybe old soul-ish, I don't know. But in addition to being drawn to it, I've just lived there for a long time, so I'm most comfortable. So I need to live other places in order to get comfortable. But let me just play a nice old tune because it's where I live and where I'm comfortable. when to quit a tune, and I probably don't. But, you know, I didn't feel like I wanted to be finished, so I kept going. So the idea of this feeling time, you know, obviously it's not a mechanical process. It's not, you know, but it is something that you do, that you can work toward, you know, step by step by step. And I actually am not doing this. I didn't even think about doing this to connect it with the Zoom lessons that I offer. But if you're a musician and you wanted to, you know, get together once or twice over Zoom and talk about some strategies if you struggle with that. But when you practice, and I'm talking just now to everybody, so I think you'll understand this. The best way to practice is if you're willing to take a real simple concept, the simplest, you know, the most basic way you can narrow it down, just work on that. And you can do all kind of things with the metronome, and you can develop now, you can strengthen that space. And of course the best way to practice is to do much more than simply play tunes. Right? So all these things can grow and learn if you apply yourself to them. So let me see what I wrote in summary here in my paper. Feeling, okay, I already said this, that we're talking about feeling, not counting or organizing or anything you think about. You develop that sense of feel. And, okay, here's why I wrote that down. I wondered, I mentioned this as well, that when you assemble something by getting all the parts together, and I feel this with some classical musicians, that like they're putting the right like space in and they're broad, yeah, right, but it's like there's not necessarily a connection with that little, you know, broadening that they did, or the little fermata they put over something, and the rest of the feel. It's just like, okay, a little more space here, and then a little thing, and then speed up a little here. And it's done so perfectly, except it's a jigsaw puzzle with lines on it. Or it's like a paint by numbers thing, right? And what fixes the jigsaw puzzle or the paint by numbers and having either of them not look mechanical is having those edges filled in, you know, getting rid of the lines on the jigsaw puzzle, or being able to shade and blend the colors, right, in a paint by numbers thing. And the classical pianists, Leon Fleischer, Lang Lang, Horowitz, that I'm really drawn to listen to are the ones who can, as I'll say, transcend the page. Because what's on the page is mechanical. It's the mechanics of the music. And, you know, and the reason that for 500 years or however long it's been, people learn music or play the piano, whatever, through sheet music is that that's how music's been communicated. Now, people learn differently before the printing press was invented. People are learning differently now after sound recording has been invented. So it's not this thing that you learn music, and music has always been you learn how to play what's on the page. Now that's just, you know, where we are, you know, culturally, developmentally, societally, and that's changing. And you know, I was thinking this the other day, or sometime recently, or maybe earlier today, that you know, I think that some classical composers would be, if this is such a thing, or are rolling over in their graves when they hear some of their music being played with such an attention to the specificity of detail that it's forgotten that this actually comes from an expression. And for me, if you're playing written music, your job is to learn that thoroughly, and I'm bad at it, you know, as far as the exact note replication, or not as good at it as most, anyway. Learn that thoroughly so that you can now put that human feeling, that humanity back into it, because that doesn't exist on the printed page. You put something on the printed page, you play it right, and it may just sound like, you know, ridiculously mechanical. Okay, you know, I got no strings, but I really do, you know. And so my challenge to you, if you are a musician who reads, is to, what Lang Lang says, feel the note. But I would say feel the whole thing. And I think I told you that I heard Lang Lang on the radio some years ago performing something. I didn't know who it was, but immediately like, whoa, wait, this guy is connected to this. I want to know who he is. And fortunately, I was able to find out. I'm not, you know, a real gigantic listening student of classical music. There's a lot I don't know and haven't experienced. But you know, those players and others that I've heard really draw me to them because of that sense of connection to the feel, to feel what you're doing, to feel time. So let me play one more tune, and I'll just try to feel it. So there you go, a little look inside the process. I'll look at the comments and answer any questions if there are any, make events for next week for the Escape from Home Hour and Inside the Process, and there'll be some live streams, or some gigs actually, starting next week. Keep an eye on the calendar. I'm right now super busy preparing for all kinds of things. I will try not to fall behind and stuff. But I will look forward to seeing you again. Thanks so much for being here. Consider the support link if you are so inclined, and again, thank you to those of you who do. Have a great week. I'll see you soon, I hope.